MLB opening day. This is opening day 2023. Baseball has the longest season of all the sports. And for that reason, opening day actually means the least of the three sports we're looking at: MLB, NFL, and NBA. NFL is the biggest because, well, you have 18 weeks, but 17 games in the regular season for each team. NBA is 82 games, so it means something more than baseball. When I look at MLB, though, they really get as little out of opening day as they can. NFL starts off, they have their opening game on Thursday night, prime time for everyone to watch, and the reigning Super Bowl champion hosts the first game of the season. And then they end up trying to line up a good game on Sunday night, a good game or two on kickoff Sunday. NBA, they usually schedule a couple big, attractive matchups with big market teams to begin their season. Major League Baseball, what do they do? Compare these other two sports that have primetime games when everyone else can watch them. They have opening day during the day, and that's why it is called opening day, and baseball is a day sport. But the problem with that is they do it on a weekday, and if you have a job and you can't just take the day off, you're going to miss the game. That's the issue for me with Major League Baseball, because they do it during a weekday.
And if you're in school, same thing.
School, work, it's almost always been a problem unless you had your spring break. And a couple of times that happened where it's like, oh, I can actually follow the first game of the season. In 2017, Major League Baseball actually had a great idea. And they only did it for one season. I thought it was a great idea, and to me, it was very enjoyable because for once they had opening day on the weekend. During the day, as it should be, but it was on the weekend so you could actually pay attention and follow the game, not while you're at school, not while you're at work. And they had the whole lineup all together. They finally did something smart, and then right away, the next season, they gave up on it. Now, what are your thoughts about that, JD?
It was a great one-time thing, and we really enjoyed it, as you just said. They should have continued to do it that way, but I guess that's a tradition that was upheld, keeping it in the daytime on the weekdays typically.
And when it comes to Major League Baseball, we like tradition. And what has baseball done? Well, they've thrown out so much of tradition, and they think that's what's turned people off to the sport. Well, for me, what's turned me off to some extent is, like many fans, three outcomes with the sport. What are you going to get? You're going to get home run, walk, or strikeout. And people like home runs, but when you have too many home runs, you can have too much of a good thing. There needs to be other elements in the game, and fans have talked about speed. You need to get speed and athleticism back in the game, and I agree with that. Definitely need to get speed and athleticism in the game. But one of these areas that we look at is we do not like the constant interleague, and especially having that on opening day. I've got a big beef with that. In this particular season, for us as Giant fans, the Giants, the San Francisco Giants, are beginning their season on the road in New York, not to face the Mets. They're facing the Yankees. I don't like it. It's not that you can't have interleague during the regular season, but you should not kick off or begin a season in that way.
And I don't like it either. And it's just a highlight of the new interleague format that goes into effect this year, where basically they just are blowing up the schedule, and it's interleague all the time, multiple series, every single series, every team gets to play every other team. It takes away the specialness of the All-Star game and the World Series, which we grew up with. Players only get to face teams from the other league at those times. Very special. The league wanted to have more of these types of matchups during the regular season, so they changed the schedule to make interleague like this all the time. And on one hand, I can say and see how it is cool to play every team once like the other leagues do, but as you said, baseball, the tradition, don't prefer it.
Yeah, it's sad because it's unavoidable now with the way the leagues are set up. And I never had a problem with one league having a couple more teams than the other. Fans can say that's unfair. It personally never bothered me, but now we always have to have at least one interleague series going on at the same time. And that would be a good episode to do another time, was when interleague was introduced and how special that was and how fun that was for the first several years. Now, okay, it's not that you face these teams every year, but it does take away from the All-Star game. It does seriously take away from the World Series. And I liked how both leagues had their own styles and their own ways of playing. But now it's all the same.
Right,
and you could talk about the universal DH. That's another thing we wanted to get to, was when you're talking about the styles of play. If you asked me no DH or DH, if it had to be one way for both leagues, I'd go without the DH. I love the strategy of the National League game, and I love the fact that I think the pitcher should stand in there and be a man and be accountable and have to face the music when he's throwing at other guys, that he should be able to stand in the batter's box himself and can't just run off the mound and go to the dugout. That's the reason why, and that's not the only reason, but I think that's a good reason. You don't hear enough about it, for pitchers batting, and they should be able to lay down bunts. I like double switches and the small ball of National League Baseball. And we have more than enough home runs these days anyway. Considering guys are not trying to get on base, they're not trying to steal bases and move guys over, and you don't have speed, even though MLB wants speed, you have more than enough home runs going around.
Right, I agree on those points too. And it just takes away the uniqueness of those situations. Also, with the increased interleague is increased travel and having to go to the Midwest and the East Coast more. So I'm sure that could affect quality of play. And we've seen plenty of examples of attendance being poor for interleague series. The more interleague series you have, especially here in San Francisco, Giants games, you got the Royals as your opening opening day, opening series team, you might get good attendance for that first game, but I don't think the second and third game are going to be attended well at all, which has been the case in San Francisco for interleague.
I'm glad you brought that up, and that is something that bothers me and bothers both of us. Is it's not just that you start as a National League team on the road against the American League. Your home opener is against a boring, I'm sorry, Royals, boring American League team. You're not starting off against the Dodgers,
which they're playing second,
or the Padres, or an interdivisional team. You're not facing a team like the Cardinals or the Braves, the Phillies. No, you're starting off against the Royals. So both the opening day game and then the home opener are against American League teams. And what gets you in the playoffs? It's how you do up against the National League. I want more National League games. I don't want less National League games. I would rather face, yes, the Cardinals and the Cubs and the Braves and the Phillies and the Mets more than these games against the Yankees and the Red Sox. And I know I'm in the minority saying that. Here's another problem that we have: expanded playoffs. It's an issue in every sport. NBA has way too many teams. NFL added the 7 team, which is never a team of any consequence when it comes to playoffs. It's all about money. Then you have Major League Baseball, who's worse than all of them now. It's the worst league, and it makes it affects the regular season and the NFL. But I also want to get back, or the regular season and the playoffs. What I also want to get back to is, once you're facing all these teams every year now, home and road, what's going to be a big draw in the regular season now?
Right.
I don't know. A couple years from now that, okay, you face the Yankees and the Red Sox as a National League team every year, or if you're the American League, you're going to face the Dodgers and the Cardinals or the Cubs. What's special?
It definitely diminishes it.
And there's no mystery, like you said, to the All-Star game. Well, these players are always playing each other all the time.
Right.
And the World Series, same thing. These teams are playing each other every year, twice a year. So what?
And the Giants are basically an AL team. At the start of this season, the first 3 series are against AL teams. And the Dodgers are that 4th series. And then again, the Tigers. So 4 out of 5 of the first series for the San Francisco Giants this year are AL opponents. How they couldn't make the Dodgers be that home opening series.
I mean, we even had a big enough problem when the Giants were playing the Oakland A's early in the season.
Right.
Because I always said, I'm not fully against interleague, but if you said interleague or no interleague, you have to make a decision. I would say I could do without it. Or I like the option of, could we do it every other year with interleague? But can we at least play the National League games? And traditionally, when we had interleague come in, it was, okay, you're going to have about 2 solid months of National League on National League, American League on American League, and then you bring the interleague for the summer. It's something fun for the summer.
June, July, August.
And then for usually the second half of August and then all of September, you're back to all your own league.
Right.
There are no other interleague games. So there's so many things with baseball, but those are a few things that we don't like. How about some of these rule changes? Let's start off with, the one that's at the top of the list, the pitch clock. How do you feel about the pitch clock?
We haven't seen much at this point, but we are going to be watching upcoming. We've heard a bit about the reactions and some of the outrageous incidents that have happened in spring training with pitch clocks and stepping out of the batter box, penalties. when you have games, as you pointed out in the past, in Boston, in home run friendly ballparks, they go on for 3+
Yes,
hours.
the Red Sox Yankee marathon games,
Yes,
especially at Fenway Park,
in the playoffs, in the World
just
Series.
get ready to sit down for like 4 hours
Houston,
for those
right.
games.
Right, it's just dragged on and on and on. And I just remember the Red Sox and Dodgers World Series being such an example.
Those were, yes. To me, Fenway Park is the most exhausting games to watch. And can someone be honest? Yes, the ballpark has its history, but the place is kind of a joke going to play there, and it's so different than your average ballpark. It's one thing if one part of the park, there is nothing normal about Fenway Park. And I'm not saying I dislike it altogether, but it's overrated. And it it gives you a game that's excessively long being there.
Right,
When you have teams that can rake
right.
on both sides, like you have the Yankees and the Red Sox when you're going back to the early 2000s, '03, '04, the years everyone remembers. And, well, now you just have too much offense, period, with what's changed in baseball.
Right. So speeding up things definitely should be better in a lot of ways.
I'm for it. Overall, I'm for it. I don't love it, but these games have gotten too long. It's one thing, everyone's willing to sit through an NFL game. But what I've come to appreciate about the NBA is, yeah, I can be done with that game in 2.5 hours. It's only going to go to 3 hours, maybe if it's overtime. Overtime's only 5 minutes. MLB had to find a way to speed things up a little bit, and it's not that a lot of these changes I don't like. One of the ones that wasn't this year, but we're looking back on, is the three batter minimum. I'm also for that because I like matchups and bringing a lefty, but with all the analytics and all the matchups that came into play the last handful of years, it just got ridiculous with relievers, and it really got out of hand with all these lefty on lefty matchups and then pulling the lefty immediately and then bringing in another righty. That was another one that was one that I was really glad to see come in. And then another two is the fake throw to third, throw to first. I was more than happy to see that finally go. Not one of the major ones on here, but now a minimum of throwing over to first twice, and then you can't throw over to first anymore when a runner's on. I like that as well.
Right.
Bases. Now the bases are bigger than they were, and it's supposed to be for player safety. I don't like it. It throws out, because again, history books do matter, records do matter. It's going to make things. It's going to bring more offense in the game. It's going to, yes, it will increase scoring. People say, well, it's just a couple inches. A couple inches matter when you're doing that on every base.
Yeah.
I know home plate, they say, hasn't changed, but it will matter first, second, third. It's going to be easier to steal more bases, even though I want to see speed, but I want to see speed done. I want to see speed come back naturally.
Right.
I don't want it to come back because we now have bigger bases, and now there's less distance between first and second, and, well, I just don't think there's going to be much stealing between second and third. I don't get it, and I don't like it.
Same here. I just rather see the original type of running strategy reinstated instead of shortening the distance and making it easier. It's more about making the players athletic again than making it easier under the current system and setup to steal.
Right, and that's your issue, baseball. You go out and find better athletes. We know, yeah, white guys, except for a few, generally can't run. You can find some fast guys like Trey Turner, but yeah, it's up to baseball and these organizations to recruit better athletes. And I do think, again, the records matter. And that brings me into the extra runner or the runner on second for extra innings, which I've hated from the beginning. I mean, I'm cool to a certain extent with the pitch clock, but this is one I've never cared for because it affects, again, it's so not baseball. That's the thing about it. It's untraditional, and I think it's unfair to the pitchers and their records. You're just saying, okay, you're putting a man already automatically in scoring position. I'm happy to sit through an extra inning game. I really am, without putting a runner on second. It's just, the regular game itself, in between pitches, has taken too long. That's true.
Right.
But if you really do love the game and you enjoy the game for what it is, and if you're a baseball fan, you should, I don't see any difficulty, or I wouldn't understand if it's a good quality game, why you wouldn't be willing to sit through it, and you need a runner on second to, make it more intense, make it feel more like it's not sudden death, but there's more pressure. There's more pressure. And that's a whole nother story. NFL, it should be sudden death. That's another episode to talk about. I think that's just so ridiculous. You have 4 quarters to win the game. Don't cry about not being able to stop the other team in overtime.
Right. But yeah, having a runner on second that has not earned the position and having the pitcher penalized in their ERA, in their stats for having that runner come in and score is just so unfair. And like you said, we want the time to speed up the total of the game, but we want it still done in the format of playing the game, getting a hit to get to second base to come to home plate, not being placed there artificially.
And then the last major rule change is shifts. If there's anything I think they got right here, it's dealing with the shift, because you want to say something that got out of hand. I mean, the shift got out of hand. I mean, when you're putting all your infielders on one side of the diamond except for one, and then when you're always putting a guy right up the middle, there's something wrong with that. Right behind second base. If it's something special, okay. I remember Tony La Russa did that way back. He would do 5 infielders like in an extra inning game, and it was a really radical thing he would do, but it would be, you'd only have 2 outfielders at that point. I remember that's what he would do for extra innings. But the fact that this became just regular throughout the game, there's just something that doesn't sit well with me when a guy hits a perfect ball at the middle. It's not a single. It's like, what? And you could say, well, you're stuck in the past or things got to change. It's just, I'm sorry, that's baseball. A guy hits a perfect ball right up the middle and he's out.
Right.
What am I watching here? And you remember a lot of the big left-handed hitters that we grew up with, and there would be shifts, but they weren't like what we were seeing the last several years.
Right.
You'd see someone like Barry Bonds or Mo Vaughn, and you'd see a shift. And whenever I think of Mo Vaughn, I always have to think of him diving on the turf in the All-Star game at Philadelphia. That's the image and the picture that always comes into mind. I love that. But I'm completely for this reduction of the shift and ban of these extreme shifts.
Yeah. Same here. It's just ridiculous at a certain point how certain hits have been taken away, and it's just not baseball anymore at a certain point when you can't hit a perfect line drive up the middle, like you said, and you have a star player not being able to beat the shift still and from time to time.
Yeah, so we have some things we like, we have some things we don't like with baseball. I mean, I will say it will be interesting to see how the start of this season goes. I think there are some bigger issues with the sport than the pitch clock, with bases. The shift was very important to get rid of. I still enjoy the game, but it's not what it was, and I've accepted the fact that it's not going to get better. It's not ever going to get to the level it was for me, because for quite a few years, baseball was my favorite sport. And I just don't see that ever happening again, because so many of these changes are going to remain, especially the interleague and the universal DH and just the way the playoffs are set up.
Yeah.
It just won't be the same. And for me, it's my order is NFL, and then NBA has jumped over MLB. And they don't really consider and they don't care anymore about the traditional fan. It's not just people who are old. It's not just like, oh, the 70-plussers. There are those of us who are younger who still like a lot of the tradition. It's just a lot of the changes they had made actually turned us off.
Right.
And the style of what the game had become turned us off to baseball.
Right. For us, it's the exact opposite of what they're trying to accomplish. All these new changes, or almost all of them, have turned us off and made us more disinterested than we ever have been. And I agree with you. I don't see myself ever being as seriously interested in baseball as I ever was in the past, ever again.
Yeah, it's amazing, because when we started this, and I think of where I started off as a fan, our logo is actually a baseball, and we have not talked about baseball really at this point. We have primarily talked about the NFL and then secondarily NBA. We have not had a separate episode or show about Major League Baseball, and that's very telling.
Yes.
And it was, again, for me, many years where I would say, without hesitation, baseball is number one.
Yep.
And that's just not happening. And again, I know we're in the minority here. I don't care for bat flips. I really don't. If you're going to stare and watch for a few moments, fine. But I can do without the bat flips, because for me it is showing up the opponent.
Yeah.
And it is about tradition. There's a certain way you play, and there is a certain level of professionalism
And respect.
that there should be, and respect on the field. That's not what's wrong with baseball. It comes down to, you can talk about all these other things too, like the bat flips, but I want to see the quality of play on the field, but I do want to see still some tradition maintained, unaltered, and some professionalism, and I don't like to see players celebrating like it's football. It's not football. It's not the NBA. This is a different sport.
And especially in so many circumstances where the game has not been won, and it's not even that significant of
Right.
a hit or home run.
Have a little perspective
Yeah.
about what's happening. It's like in the NFL when players celebrate, they're down by a couple touchdowns, and they put a big hit, they lay some guy out, and they're celebrating. It's like, you're losing by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, or you're even getting blown out. It's like, Come on. My guy, Quan Alexander, was the guy. They give up a 5 yard, 10 yard gain, and he, levels a guy. Come on. You just gave up a play. It wasn't even a negative play. It wasn't even a play for no gain. You gave up yards, and here you are celebrating, and half the time you're missing tackles anyway. So that's a whole nother story. But that's the current generation is. In the NBA too, it's the I have to give the high five after missing the free throw. No, you didn't. You actually just gave up points. You're making 30 million, 40 million, 50 million, and your self-esteem is that low that you need to get high fives from the guys because you failed to make a free throw. You just didn't get free points, and you need to be practically hugged.
Yeah, I don't know what year that started, but that was not the case.
That's the point.
In the 90s.
You just failed.
Yeah.
And you're having to get high fives and encouragement when you're making, again, 30, 40 plus $1 million a year.
Yeah, in the 90s when we started watching basketball, it was not happening.
So that's a wrap. That's a wrap for talking about baseball today. We'll have some more uniform reports, and I suspect we'll be talking about NFL sooner rather than later again.
Right.